Hello there and welcome to the Secrets of Organ Playing podcast. I'm your host, Vidas Pinkevicius. Today's guest is Roger Sherman, who is the Associate Organist Emeritus of St. Mark's Cathedral in Seattle and President of Loft Recordings. He is also the host of Organ Loft, an hour-long weekly radio program about choral and organ music broadcasted throughout Washington and Oregon for more than 20 years. In today's inspiring conversation, Roger shares his wide experience recording organ music, and we also discuss his newest CD release called Bach Under the Influence. Let's go to the show. So, Roger, I'm so delighted that we're having this inspiring conversation, and I hope our listeners will get so much out of it because let me start this way. I remember meeting you for the first time in 2000, about 15 years ago, in Göteborg, in Gothenburg, in Sweden, where this large North German style Baroque organ was inaugurated, and you, with Loft Recordings, you recorded, I think, every recital there. Am I correct?
Yeah. Every recital, yes.
Yes. 2-week marathon, right? Sometimes a few recitals a day, right? A couple of them.
Yes.
Amazing experience. And when I went to that Orgrite New Church where this organ was, I remember you recorded one particular recital, Pamela Reuter-Finstra playing Tunderworks, right?
Yes.
And improvisations based on the Tunder excerpt, I think. And I saw these large microphone stands, right? And I thought, wow, that's very unique. I was never experienced before how organ recordings were made before. So I was sort of entered into a special situation there. So do you remember that time?
Oh yes, quite well. And Pamela later recorded the complete works of Tunder on that organ.
Yeah.
At Loft Recordings, and it was a wonderful instrument and a wonderful situation there.
Yeah, and she speaks very fondly of you and your work, and I say you are the magician when it comes to organ, basically recordings using special technology and special techniques that I believe help to recreate the original organ sound, right?
Yes, the organ's a wonderful, challenging instrument to record. As you know, it's a family of instruments. It's not an instrument, and so every organ has different quirks and different optimal microphone placements, and every room is different. As you know, the room is as much a part of the organ sound as the organ itself, and microphones listen differently than people do, and they have to be placed in positions where they do their job the best, and it's a challenge, and it's also very much fun to make good recordings of pipe organs.
Wonderful. Sometimes organ and recording engineers use some artificial techniques to enhance the sound. Do you also try to enhance the sound, that it would be more lively, more than natural, or you are sort of purist?
Well, I very rarely do that. I do that only when it's not possible to get good results using more natural means, you might say.
Yeah.
I think ultimately the choice of microphones and the placement of those microphones gives most recording engineers lots of latitude in producing the final sound. And only if there's a time or a situation where there's a problem that cannot be solved, then you go to the toolkit. And I'll just say I'm not religious about avoiding those tools. I know how to use them when they're necessary, but I end up as it turns out, that I rarely use them.
Wonderful. Um, did you learn the craft of recording organ music yourself, or did you apprenticed with somebody, or you studied somewhere?
Well, that's a good question. I did not have formal education
Uh-huh.
in audio, but from the time I was a teenager, I was interested in electronics and recordings in particular. As a young organist, I was almost more interested in recordings of organs than I was live performances.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
That world, the world of the record in those days, opened up the possibility for hearing instruments that I would never be able to see in person. And so I made my own electronics in high school, and when I was in the college age, I latched on to some recording engineers and went with them and recorded, to listen and ask questions while they recorded various concerts and projects and so on, and got a good foundation, I think, in the science of it. And that's my background, I should say. Now I've recorded maybe 300 recordings in the organ.
Yeah.
uh, Experience is also a great teacher.
It's amazing. Do you prefer some part of the day or night for recording, when the special silence, or even the silent day is not the same as silent night? We can think in the church, right? How do you decide the time of the recording?
Well, you try to do it when it's quiet, and there's been you never know what the situation is. We recently did a recording of Kimberly Marshall in Handel's Church in London, and that church is on Hanover Square, which we later discovered the locals called Hangover Square. There was a bar right across the street, and we thought we would be recording from about midnight till maybe 8 in the morning or so. And it turned out that there were people right outside the windows all night long on Saturday night or Friday night, I think. It was one Friday or Saturday, I don't remember now. But when they finally left, the tube opens at 6 in the morning. So they all got on the tube at 6 in the morning. We started finally to record. And then just about an hour later, a jackhammer started down the street, and we had to quit. So we ended up recording on Sunday afternoon in the middle of the day, and that's when it was quiet, and we got our work done. And then recording in places like in Oaxaca, Mexico, down was also a real challenge for sound, because some of the churches there don't even have glass in the windows, so you really hear everything that's going on outside. And if it happens to be a pack of barking dogs that don't belong to anybody, you can listen to them on your headphones all night long. And this was recording Robert Bates. One particular time, they were barking all night long in Tlaquechuaya. And finally, at 4 o'clock in the morning, they went to sleep. And we re-recorded the last chords of every piece so that we could get a quiet ring out, without the dog bark. And so, yeah, noise is the key thing about making recordings, picking a time of day. You
Uh-huh.
never.
It reminds me of the experiences that organ builders have when they try to record, not record, but tune and maintain the instrument, right? Regular, they always need also some quiet times, and especially if the organ is very large, then it's very tricky to find a good silent time, I think.
Yes, and sometimes you can't make noise when it is silent. I've recorded in several places where there's homes nearby, or the rectory is next door, or something like that, and the last thing they want to hear is full organ sound at 1 o'clock in the morning through the windows. So
Yeah.
that's a consideration as well.
And sometimes the rectory of the church, or I don't know, the staff of the organization that the organ is in this hall, for example, they don't understand what goes into this recording, right? What organist and engineers go through, and they say, okay, just record whenever you want, or pick a couple of hours and it's done, right? How long does it take to record? Can you record it in a couple hours? Probably not.
Oh, for a typical CD, organ CD,
Uh-huh.
we usually takes 3 sessions for us to do the recording plus editing time after that. That's most people are able to do their work in that period of time.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
an editing session or a recording session would be anywhere from 4 to 8 or more hours long.
Wow, that's very strenuous, mentally, not only physically but mentally, job for the organist as well, because if they're doing several takes, multiple takes, and if you are sort of editing, I imagine that. For example, organist has to be very precise in picking the right tempo, the stable constant tempo for the entire episode, if not the entire piece, right? If you glue the episodes together later on when you edit, is that a problem? Do you notice that?
Oh yes, I mean some organists are very good at maintaining a constant tempo through many takes if they need those. Others are not. Sometimes they'll start faster and go slower as they redo things. And so, yes, that can be a challenge if you get to the editing point and realize that the only measure you have, a good measure, is one that's slightly different tempo than the rest of the piece that you've got put together.
Uh-huh.
There's little tricks you can do for things like that, but it's editing things. But consistency is always an issue. Whenever you do an edit of any kind, consistency is the issue, and with what you're splicing together, and so no edit really is without some consequence, even if it's very small.
Yes, yes, of course. Do you meet any organists who don't want actually to edit their work? Just they play the work one, two, 3 times perhaps, and pick the best, and it's done.
Yes. Uh, Generally speaking, I would say that most of the organists that I record are very, very well prepared for the recording sessions,
Uh-huh.
and many of them, a large number of them, do record in one shot like that. And maybe, well, for example, I just finished recording Joan Lippincott playing Orgelbuchlein, and she played every piece in Orgelbuchlein twice, and that was it.
Yeah.
It was done in 2 days. Um, David Yearsley I recorded at Stanford once, and he did his entire recording in one day. That's because the day before that, which we had to do the recording, we had a couple days for a recording set aside for him. The airlines failed to deliver the bag with the microphone stands and the cables, special cables and all that kind of thing. So they failed to put it on the little trolley, the little moving belt.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So it just sat next to the belt. Nobody knew where it was. They couldn't find it anywhere. And then somebody eventually put it on the belt, and it got flown down to us in the Bay Area. But David did his whole recording in one night for his whole CD, The Great Contest. And Bill Porter also is very, very good. He rarely needs to re-record things. So I mean, everybody is really quite well prepared these days, I think.
Of course, you're working with extremely experienced organ masters, I would say, globally recognized and leading figures in the organ world. That would be very rare that someone from this caliber probably would be, sight reading a work for the recording, right?
Well, it's a great privilege too to go someplace, hear a great organ and a great organist, and delve into really good music. It's oftentimes music that's not well known, and so it's a great thing to do. It's a very personally enriching thing to spend time with the people that are on our record labels, and to listen to them play and talk about the music and talk about why they do it this way or why they do it that way or what's the correct way to do something. And I found it very enjoyable.
And of course, since you are an organist yourself, you can understand what they talk and be in this on the same page basically, and even make some suggestions for them, right? To make their interpretation maybe from your standpoint better, I think.
Yeah, I value my background as an organist and a choir director and so on, that we're playing in the same play space, you might say.
Yeah.
And there are certain things that are different about playing the organ for a recording than, say, playing for a live audience. And sometimes I can bring that experience to bear and to the benefit of the player. And of course, I do that as much as the relationship will allow. But giving the feedback on their playing and also supporting them. I think it's harder to play for a microphone than it is to play for an audience. Because an audience is always giving you feedback, whether you explicit or not. Kind of what they're thinking, I think, if you're a good organist. But for the microphone, it's a pretty cold thing. And
yes.
So I think a lot of organists appreciate another set of ears in the room, someone to tell them they did a good job, someone to tell them that they did a particularly good job on this part or that part, and that you like the registrations, or have you thought about doing this? And for variety's sake, how about doing a different plenum on this piece than the last piece, and so on and so on.
Well, Loft Recordings, it's such a tremendously important company nowadays in the organ world, I think. And leading, can I say leading company in the recording world?
Sure.
Because of course there are many other, but the quality of the work that you do is really sets the standard for the entire industry. I think in 2000, when all these Gothenburg Organ Academy recitals were recorded, and later on when on this Orgrita New Church organs first CDs like Hans Davidsson, right, and Pamela Reuter-Finstra and who else, Bill Porter, of course, recorded their works with you. I think you set the standard for the future also, to include the liner notes and registrations and large body of information about the organ, which not necessarily was the case with other organ engineers or organ recording engineers. Do you think, is it true to say that you set the standard for the future?
Well, we try to set a standard for ourselves, which is, we're customers too, in a way. That what do we want to see when we buy an organ CD, and of course we want to see as much information as possible, especially if it's the first recording on a new instrument of significance. We want to know about the instrument. We want to see the stop list. If appropriate, we want to see what stops people used, and so on. And so we've always tried to produce products that have a rich printed booklet component to them. And of course, being well recorded as well, just in terms of the audio quality. From the day we started the company, it was our goal to have premier recording technology that is to the best presentation of the organ we could on audio. And for that, I just would like to mention my colleague Eric Sikkema, who is in Sweden, who is also a very, very fine recording engineer, and he has done recordings for us as well that are absolutely top shelf.
That's true. You cannot do this work alone, probably. Yes, you have to have some partners, even during the same project. Or can you work alone when recording?
Oh, our recordings have numerous engineers.
Yeah,
I've probably done most of them, But anything that Eric does, for example, we gladly and wonderfully accept because his work, the quality of his work is very good. And there are a few others as well. We have rejected releases that have not met our standards in terms of audio quality, and we're fussy about it. And
it's like an organ builder's job, right? Or artisan's work. It's basically an art. I would really think that you are doing it's an art form, recording, right? Because it's unique, it's personal, and it's really artistically very pleasing.
Yeah, there is an artistic element to it. You have to start with the fact that not all music is written to create the same effect. So, to pick an extreme example, the way you would record Messiaen might be quite different than the way you perform 17th century organ dances.
Yeah.
That's one. Sometimes the music is quite intimate and chamber-like. Sometimes the music is impressionistic. And for those situations, you want to have a different musical result in the recording as well as the performance, even if it's the same organ. And so you have to buy into an artistic concept, and then the exact placement of microphones and the number of mics that you use. There's no textbook that tells you exactly what the answer is to that precisely. There's rooms are different and organs are all unique, and you really have to make judgments about what is the most pleasing result and what serves the music and the performer's concept the best.
That's right. And most recently, Roger, you released this wonderful CD called Johann Sebastian Bach Under the Influence, right? On St. Mark's Cathedral in Seattle, Washington, which I understand is the recording from the earlier days, right? From 2001.
Yes.
On the fabulous 1965 Flentrop. Can you tell us a little bit, for starters, about this recording, about the organ and the significance of the Flentrop in comparison, for example, with other instruments of that period in the United States?
Yeah, this was a very important instrument. It really, I think, changed organ building history in the United States. During this time, about this time, E. Power Biggs had a very popular radio program, and then just before he was taken off the air, he had a Flentrop organ installed at Harvard, and so he moved from focusing on the weekly radio program to producing a series of recordings called Bach Organ Favorites. These were the most popular recordings that he ever made. And so when a new Flentrop, twice the size, came to Seattle, he came out to play the inaugural concerts. And I was 15 years old at that time, and I went and heard him, as I was a fan of his records. But that aside, that personal note aside, it was really, really unusual for an Episcopal cathedral to have a Dutch organ. It was an instrument that was criticized from the very beginning as being an instrument unsuitable for playing Anglican liturgy, and so on. And it was quite a bold step in a particular direction. And that was the work of Peter Halleck. By the way, it is his birthday today. He's no longer with us, but November 19th is his birthday. And his vision of music at the cathedral, which was quite different than that at other Episcopal cathedrals, I think. His main objective was to have an organ at the cathedral that could play the music of Bach. And in 1965, this was it. And that was the result of a lot of faith by some people and the ability to raise enough money to produce an instrument with the full-length 32-foot principal on the facade. It's a big organ, physically, and fortunately, it's in a very, very good room acoustically. So there are other instruments that followed, and soon after we had this sort of popular explosion of European tracker organs in the United States, which were course, aided by a good exchange rate for the dollar. Soon after that, we had started having American organ builders who are starting to build in that style and going to Europe and studying the antique instruments and coming back and building their ideas, executing their ideas of observations of the old instruments. And then we ended up with an indigenous cadre of organ builders. And this all started, I think, when the Flentrop came to Seattle. That was a big boost that sort of started things in that direction.
Lucky West Coast, I would say, right? That it had Flentrop, it had you, Westfield Center, and of course Loft Recordings.
Well, and also John Brumbaugh
and Paul Fritz, and of course Martin Pasi, right?
Yeah.
All these great figures that are still active today, some of them at least, in this field, and makes the entire country, I would say, global leader when it comes to historically oriented organ building tradition and performance practice as well.
Yeah, we're very fortunate.
Yeah, great coincidence, but maybe not a coincidence, because many people were prepared for that. The situation was ripe, right, for that to happen.
Yeah, well, I think the Flentrop was a big, bold step in a direction that nobody thought we were going in. Mm-hmm. But after it happened, it was, I think people realized very quickly that it really was a very successful organ, not just for playing Bach, but for playing Romantic music as well. And so it was quite influential. People went, they heard, they played it, and were convinced that it really was a better way to make organs. And they changed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And then of course these later landmark organs appeared as Gene Bedian's organ in Lincoln, Nebraska, right, Opus 8. And also what Paul Fritz's and of course John Brombaugh's instruments set the standard also for the later generations as well. This is very early. We say what is 1965. It's in Europe. It's a very strange time where everything was built sort of in this Orgelbewegung tradition, and with not very good materials, I would say, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and in America it was different. Perhaps I don't know why, but these organs which were built in America at that time and later on, they're still very, very important today. While in Europe, from that period, churches start to sell them, and transport them to other countries. For example, to Lithuania as well. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. So you're getting all of Western Europe's 1960s organs in
exactly,
Lithuania?
like German organs and some of the English instruments. Some of them are decent instruments, but of course nobody would throw away or sell an organ that has a tremendous significance for that place. But they somehow get a feeling that they were not very good at that time, at least in our cases.
Yeah, I think the same thing has happened here. There were a bunch of instruments installed shortly after the Flentrop from builders in Europe, and that were not very high quality instruments. But people thought, well, if it's a tracker organ, it's it's going to be a better instrument. And it was these instruments that we got here are now also being sort of discarded or moved from their original locations to someplace else. And so, it just goes to say that an organ is more than its action. The action may lead you in a particular direction, but there's voicing and pipe materials and acoustics and placement and all these things that make a difference. And the Flentrop organ has withstood the test of time, I think, in that way. But there are other organs from that era and slightly after that have not.
Yeah. And in this recording that we're talking about, Bach under the influence, you chose to showcase some of the most intricate works of Bach, right? And not only of Bach. In the first part of the program, there are some fascinating pieces by other composers. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Yeah, the concept of the concert was that the first half of the program would be composers who had an influence on Bach or may have had an influence on Bach, and the second half would be Bach influencing others. So I chose pieces by, I mean, there's some very obvious composers that would have had some potential influence on Bach, certainly Vivaldi, Negrini also, since Bach had this score of his organ works. Jan Adam Reinken, it was a very important influence, we think. Georg Böhm, Pachelbel, who was his older brother's organ teacher, and so forth. So that was kind of fun. I didn't attempt, this is not a scholarly paper on who influenced Bach. It was simply a premise for a recital to listen to some of the composers that may have had influence on Bach and so on. And then one might suppose in the second half that Bach was establishing his legacy or influencing others through his work, and so it was a good premise for a concert program, I think.
Yeah, of course. I see that for example, this Vivaldi concerto in F major. It's not very often played piece, right? I would say even today.
Not on the organ.
Not on the organ, yeah.
Perhaps may be played more frequently on harpsichord, but I think it works very beautifully on the organ.
Yeah. And this, of course, Vater unser im Himmelreich by Böhm, this immortal, I should say, piece that every organist's dream is to play on the North German organ in a large room, right? On a real historical organ. But does it sound well on Flentrop?
It does. It does. And for the solo stop, I mean, you can use just about anything, but for the solo, I used the Group Positive 8-foot principal with the 8-foot Gedeckt and the 8-foot Quintadena together and tremulant. And it's a very beautiful sound, a very vocal sound.
Oh, imagine that you did that in 2001.
Yes.
Because it's such a people are still doing this today to this day, and it sort of continues this tradition to play solo voices on gentle principal sound, very vocal sound, without the need to include the mutations, right? Or reeds, for example.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely. And I think this particular piece, it's the the Lord's Prayer, the affect of the text and the music lends itself very well to that kind of simple vocal style. And for this particular one, there's a couple different versions, I think, of this piece, scores for this piece that have alternate ornamentation. And so I kind of mixed things up a little bit, if I remember correctly, that I used ornamentation from both scores to produce something that was a little bit different than the normal performance you'd hear of that piece. It's a very, as you know, the solo is highly ornamented.
Highly ornamented, exactly. And some organists value very much their organ scores of that piece, and get much stress if the score is not the same. For example, if they're playing from a different edition, right?
Yes.
Of this piece, particular Vater Unser by Böhm. But do you think that these ornaments can also be somewhat more freely improvised as well?
Oh yes. I mean, I think it depends on what stops you're using, what kind of gestures work particularly well. You might find something that is a little bit awkward, or something that you might add that is particularly effective. I think the judgment of the performer is for a particular situation is a factor in the successful performance. And so I think you should, as as an organist, the discipline, you should be able to play and understand what the composer has written for ornamentation. And after that, you should be free to embellish on it if or simplify if you think it's more effective in the particular situation you're in. So, yes, I think musical judgment is an important part of it, and you should have some.
Yeah, of course, good taste, right? Good taste, as always,
Yeah.
as the French say, always. And of course, these mutations would be represented very well in De Grigny's Tierce Entire piece. I should guess, right? How is the cornet sound on that Flentrop?
Well, it's kind of interesting that one of the concessions, I guess you'd say, in the stop list at St. Mark's from being a pure Dutch or German style organ was the addition of a tierce stop on the grate. And so it's possible to play the tierce combination on the grate manual. It has a Dutch sesquialtra on the root positive, which means, of course, that there's a break at tenor C, which makes it less suitable for playing tierce on ties. And so we're fortunate to have that tierce, which would not be a normal stop for a Dutch or German organ, on the grate. And it's a beautiful, beautiful cornet. It's not quite that wonderful French flute cornet that you hear on the root positive of French organs, but it is very effective musically nonetheless.
And I see that Bovenwerk, the third manual, doesn't have the tierce sound, right?
No, it does not.
So you have to choose either from Rückwerk or from the Hauptwerk.
Yes.
Something like that. Great choices, wonderful. And what about the second half of the program, right? When you decided that Bach also was influencing others, of course, you chose BWV 541, this magnificent, lively and joyful prelude and fugue in G major, right?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit the reasoning why this particular piece here?
Well, I think the reason that it's on this half of the program was that Bach either wrote the piece or rewrote it. We're not sure which, in order to help his oldest son, Wilhelm Friedemann, get an organ job. So this was his audition piece, and so the idea was that he would write this virtuosic, brilliant piece of music for his oldest son that would wow the committee and get him the job. And that is, of course, exactly what happened. That was also a great way to start the second half of a concert.
And we're talking about the Dresden, right? Sophia's Church.
Sophia's Church, yes, in Dresden.
Wonderful. And of course it was a great choice because he got the position. And I hope that Wilhelm Friedemann also improvised and played some of his music as well on that audition. Do we know that, or
I don't know.
I don't know either.
But I do. One thing that's kind of interesting is the that the prelude has the tempo indication of vivace, which is unusual. I don't know of any other Bach preludes and fugues that have tempo indications on their first movement like that. Which would maybe indicate something a little unusual. So it is if you play it, as at a vivace tempo, it is also more dazzling, but it's of course hard to do. But it has a particular character, I think, that is very exciting, and if you can imbue the performance with that sense of liveliness that vivace implies. The word vivace implies liveliness, and it's even more effective as a piece.
Of course. And is the acoustics of this room, of this church cathedral, suitable for that lively playing, very fast playing, for polyphonic playing as well?
Yeah, it's really quite remarkable. There's about 6 seconds of reverberation, but the room is very, very clear. and it's clear for a couple of reasons. One is that it has very large windows which reflect treble, and that helps. There are four large pillars in the room. The room is almost cubical in size, and those pillars clarify the sound. If your ear hears something coming off of the pillar, it helps organize the rest of the sound for the person. And then there's also, even though the acoustics have a very long reverberation time, there's enough of a drop right at the beginning that your ear easily distinguishes between the reverberant sound and the original sound, the direct sound. And overall, it produces a very clear effect, and but also one that's very much bathed in its reverberation.
And where did you choose to place the microphones? Out in the room or next to the organ?
There are two microphones, and they're hung in front of the organ as a spaced pair. And so this microphone placement was, and the microphone choices were made by Glenn White, who at that time, a recording engineer, friend of mine, and he made the first recordings on the organ after it was installed. The very first recording was made by Fenner Douglas from Oberlin, who later became my organ teacher, and so this recording is dedicated to the both of them, in fact. And the front cover of the recording is a near copy of that LP cover art on the LP that they made with Fenner Douglas.
Fenner Douglas, of course. We cannot underestimate his influence here, and his importance for the American organ culture. Of course. Yeah. And what about these Schubler chorales, Wachet auf and Wo soll ich fliehen hin? These are so fascinating sounding pieces, right? Every organist knows them by heart, probably. Arrangements from the cantatas by Bach. What kind of reed did you use for the solo stop, as in Wachet auf, for example?
I used the great trumpet.
Trumpet, of course.
And it works very, very well. And for the second chorale, I used the 2-foot cornet in reed stop in the pedal with the nocturne, which is a 2-foot and a 1-foot combined. And I play that down an octave from where it's written. And it works very nicely. You know, these 6 chorales are all transcriptions from movements of Bach cantatas, trio movements from Bach cantatas. And it's very close to the end of Bach's life that he publishes these things. And I think the case for why they are on this part of the program is that, the choral works of the cantatas and so forth are the largest database of music that Bach had. His choral stuff, he wrote more choral music than anything else. And in his lifetime, only one of his first cantatas was published. The rest of it was all unpublished music. And he could see that his legacy in that department might be going away when he died, as the style of music and the style of theology was all changing, and he was moving away from the kind of music he was writing. And so his idea here of taking some of the popular movements and from these cantatas and making organ trios out of them, which were a more saleable commodity than a cantata score, was a way of telling people, go look at these cantatas for great melodies and wonderful obligatos. There's a lot of material there. It's just sort of like a pointer to this database of music that he wrote. And so that's why I chose to include Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring, as we call it here in the English world, because it can be treated, it's also movement from a cantata and can be treated in exactly the same way. And I think it's Bach saying, don't just take these 6, go look for others, and get to know this repertoire, this larger repertoire that he had written for choirs and singers.
Yeah, that's exactly right. He influences others through his vocal works as well, but
Yeah.
not too many pieces were known at that time, and he chose to publish them and to direct the readers and the players through those compositions, organ compositions, arrangements to these later magnificent cantatas that he created also. We cannot really forget his art of fugue, that you include also the canon alla duodecima, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is probably one of the most intricate canons in the entire cycle of art of fugue, right? Can you tell us why did you choose this particular canon?
Oh, it's just an incredible piece.
It
How
is.
could you not choose it? It's
Yeah, yeah,
and that tremendous conflict between the triplets rhythm and the duple rhythms. It's just a great little piece, and it was just meant to be a taste of art of fugue. Just a little hors d'oeuvre, you might say,
yeah.
that you couldn't possibly on a program like this. You could have many, many, many pieces, and sometimes the audience has to go home.
Yeah,
But so there was just this little taste, and I think of all those canons, that this is a particularly clever and compelling one to listen to.
yeah. And it's not too, as Adolf Scheibe would say, not too dry, right? He
No.
criticized Bach for being too dry and unmusical, but I'm not criticizing Bach in any way, but for general audience, probably this piece really gives a glimpse to what mastery has Bach achieved in polyphonic writing and in the scientific, even scientific canon writing, right?
Mhm.
That is still accessible to the general audience, I think.
Oh yeah, I think so. This is a very melodic theme, uh, particularly after you get through the opening little trill part there. It's a very melodic theme. It's easy to hear and recognize, and it's only a 2-minute piece, 3-minute piece, and I think the audience likes it. And if you pick some interesting registrations, and it's a just like I said, it's an hors d'oeuvre. It's a nice little a piece, substance, but not very long.
Wonderful, wonderful choice actually, and this Prelude and Fugue in C major, of course, BWV 547. Am I correct in saying that it's probably the last Prelude and Fugue that Bach wrote for the organ?
It may be.
It
I
may
am.
be, right? We don't really know for sure, but it looks like the last great, at least great Prelude and Fugue.
Yeah, and what an amazing piece it is.
It is, yeah. One cannot get get enough of the prelude ritornellos in various C major, F major, and various B flat major, F minor. These even distant keys also reappearing in contrast with other material sequences and others. But also this magnificent fugue, right? That.
Yeah.
That is in what, five parts, five voices with augmented pedal. Can you tell us a little bit what you experienced in playing this fugue?
Well, the fugue is monumental, and it's quite unusual in a number of respects. One respect is that the fugue theme is only one measure long, and almost every measure in the whole piece has this theme in it somewhere, somehow. Not all, but very close to all of them. And of course, it's the four parts that are in the hands, which is a little bit more than usual for an organ. Usually it's three for a fugue, three in the hands. But it's four parts in the hands, and it goes for quite a long time until the very end when the fifth voice finally comes in the pedal. And in this case, the pedal plays it in double length notes. And it's just a wonderful thing to hear and to play. And as you know, both the prelude and the fugue have a similar ending, don't they? They have
Yeah.
these large chords and dramatic pauses, and that's the one thing that ties them together. Otherwise, they're completely unrelated, it seems. But I just wanted to point out that the first half of the recital, the Vivaldi piece, has that same feature in it in the third movement, and so it's an idea. It's an idea, a musical idea that concludes both halves of the concert that is parallel.
And a possible choice that where did Bach receive this idea of making dramatic pauses, right? Maybe he looked at Vivaldi too. We don't know, but it's possible, of course.
Yeah, and Vivaldi, of course, was a great influence on Bach, as we know now, particularly the concerto style from Vivaldi and the northern Italian composers. But I think Bach was something of a musical sponge. I think he just learned things from anyone he could, or anywhere he could, or anyhow he could. And all of his pieces, all of them are unique. It's not like he's trying to write the same prelude and fugue over and over again with slight variations or a change of key. Each piece is so different than the others. There's only one Passacaglia,
Exactly.
And this last work is an example of his, I think, of his creativity. The prelude in particular, it's just a C major scale. He says, what's going to be more simple than a C major scale? How can you create a great piece of music of tremendous complexity and rhythmic buoyancy using only a scale?
Yeah.
And there, so the art is displayed by the fact that the material he starts with is not interesting in and of itself, that interesting, but what he does to it is fabulous, and that is the art. And his bag of tricks of all the different things that he is capable of imagining and creating can be applied to something that's very simple, like a C major scale, and to produce a fabulous result. That is ultimately, I think, Bach's genius.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And every time we play Bach, Roger, right, it leaves a deep imprint, not only in our souls probably, but also in the listeners. They cannot really forget what they heard. I hope that your listeners from 2001 of that recital remember for a long time these notes and pieces, magnificent pieces, and you made this masterpiece recording that later can be also serve as a souvenir for their taste as well.
Yeah, it's Bach is special, isn't he?
Yeah, he is, and especially inspiring. As your work is inspiring, Roger, especially in Westfield Center as the leader of this organization who specializes in historical performance practice, right? We cannot underestimate your weekly radio. Radio organ shows that you basically produce, right? Can you tell us a little bit how you come up with these ideas about music on these shows? Are always they taken from the Loft recordings or somewhere else also?
No, the Organ Loft is the name of the program, and I've been doing it now for more than 20 years. It's an hour-long program. It's broadcasts on several stations in the Pacific Northwest region of the United States. It's about half choral and half organ, roughly speaking, but that doesn't mean we have many programs that are organ only and some that are choral only. But I choose here to focus on things that have connections to the Pacific Northwest. So this means local organists, local organ builders, local composers, whether they're here or whether they're playing somewhere else in the world, or things, some Loft recordings, of course, because I'm local as well. And but I do play things from all sorts of sources, not just loft.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that sort of ties it together, what I hope ties it together, is the sense that the program reflects the organ and choral culture that exists in our part of the world. What we like to listen to, what our people who are here, our artists that are here, what kind of music they make and how they make it, and to make that connection and to keep the demand really for this kind of high-level music and performance and high-level music composition, high level of instruments, that we maintain it and reinforce it and develop audiences for it through the use of that program.
I should say that together with our good friend Michael Barone and his Pipe Dreams, your work, Organ Loft, is so tremendously important for the entire organ world, because in our days organ culture is not particularly well represented in the media, I should say, right? Because of many various reasons, of course. One of them might be of speciality of this music, specifically interesting for organists, and not always for all organists, but just a few, right? Connoisseurs basically. But what you're doing is so tremendously, I think it matters a lot to the people who value your work very much, I think.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I hope you can continue this generous and inspiring work for many years in the future.
Thank you. I hope so too.
So thank you so much, Roger, for this wonderful and inspiring conversation. It's better than I ever imagined, and I hope people will get so much out of it. Not only about how we talked about how organ recordings are produced and made and recorded, right? But we talked about the intricacies about choosing the program for the recording, and about this Flentrop landmark organ that came in the United States in 1965, and of course about other things that are needed to further our organ culture across the globe. So thank you so much, Roger. And can you tell us, our listeners, where can they find you and your work online?
The website is gothic-catalog.com, and that's catalog that ends in a G, not G-U-E. And so if you go there, you will see all of the CDs that we produce, and you'll also see a little description of the Organ Loft radio program and other information as well.
Excellent. I'll make sure that I'll include this link in the description of this conversation, and I hope our listeners will find your work inspiring, as I will, for sure.
Thank you.
So keep working the great work that you're doing, and I hope to talk to you about your next recording, maybe on another landmark organ of the United States.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
If you liked this conversation, I encourage you to visit my blog Secrets of Organ Playing at organduo.lt, where you will find lots of insights, practical advice, and training for every area of organ playing. You can subscribe to this blog for free to get your daily dose of inspiration and to be the first to know when any of my future podcasts roll out. I hope to help you reach your dreams in organ playing. I'm Vidas Pinkevicius. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you online really soon.